In the previous part of flow control, we have already discussed about flow control, and we have also discussed about if-else statements. We have discussed about if-else, and we have also discussed about for loop, while, and do while loop. In this part, we are just going to extend our knowledge of flow control. So we are going to cover some of the important, or you can say the most important topics in programming. That is switch statements, and we're also going to cover the break statement, then continue statement. So these three statements, we're going to cover that. So let's move to our first one, that is switch statements. So what we're just going to do, we're just going to create a program of that includes switch statement. So switch statements are basically used on choice-based programs. On choice-based programs. So let's suppose, okay, so choice-based programs means you are going to take a choice from the user. You will take a choice from the user. The choice can be an integer value or a character value or maybe a string, and based on that choice you are going to execute some lines. So if the choice matches with the choice in your program, then the following line will be executed. So we will see how this is implemented. So before implementing, here we are going to implement that. So before implementing switch statement, we will first look how to take input from the user on the output screen. So let's suppose this is our output screen. Let's suppose this is our output screen. You already know that if we want to display anything in the output screen, we need to write cout followed by these two arrows. So the cout means console out, and this is a left shift operator. Similarly, if you want to take an input from the user, like you want user to enter something and you want to store that in some variable. Let's suppose I declare a variable int input, and let's suppose I don't know what will be the value of input, but I know that it is an integer, but I don't know its absolute value. So this value will be taken by the user. So in the output screen, we will add something like cout add input or anything like that, so that the user will get to know that an input is required. To take input from the user, we will use cin command, and this time we're not going to use the left shift operator, we're going to use the opposite, and cin and then the name of the variable. So at this line, user will enter the value of the input, and whatever value, it should be an integer, you can see here. So you can even tell the user to add an integer value. So add integer input. So that input will get stored here. So in this implementation of such statement, we will take input from the user, and based on that input we are going to run our program. So let's see how such statement works. So first of all, in the int main function, and we have not discussed about functions yet. This is a function, but we have not discussed, so I am skipping that. So we work in our main function, and these are the block of statements of int main. So let's just declare a variable here, int choice. So choice is a variable that depends on what user will enter. So I will just tell the user to enter something. So I will tell the user to enter a choice. And a semicolon. So I need to take an input from the user. In the next line, I'm just going to write cin and this. So let's suppose in the output screen, user enters 5 and presses enter. So the value of choice will become 5, or it can become anything. It depends on what the user enters here. So now we are going to use this choice in the switch statement to execute a particular line of our program. That is what flow control is. So let's say the syntax of switch statement is like this: switch and the circular bracket, and this time in the circular bracket we are not going to write any condition here. So we are going to write just a choice. It can be an integer value or any value that you want to compare with the following cases. So you can write here choice, and then it is followed by its block of statement. So a switch statement takes a choice, and based on that choice it execute some cases. So let's create a case here. The syntax is just write case, and remember that C is small here and S is also small here. So case, let's suppose the user enters 1. So we are going to write case 1, and it is followed by a colon. It's not a semicolon this time. And in this, after this column, you can write like cout, or you can write anything here like cout option 1. And in this case 1, you can write anything. You can even take input. You can even write a whole program here. If the user choice is 1, this case will be checked. But if this is not the case, we will use break statement. Okay, so break is used to break the flow of the you can say the compiler, so that it does not execute all the cases. So it will break out of the switch if the case is matched. So similarly, there can be a case 2 also, and in this case 2, we will again write cout option number 2. Similarly, you can add as many cases you want. Let's suppose this choice is not an integer value, let's suppose this is a character value. So let's say character choice. We will take input from the user. So the user will write a character. Let's suppose the user writes y as yes and a small n as no. So we will write switch, then our choice, and again in the its block of statements we can write case, and in this time we are not going to write case 1 because it is a character value this time. So we are going to write y this time, and remember that a character is represented in single quotes followed by a colon, and you can write your code here, and after you have written all the code you will have to write the break statement. Then you can write another case n, then its statements, and then break. So let's suppose the user enters y, that means the user entered yes. So the choice will become equal to y, and in the switch statement we will give y, so it is being matched with case y, and then all the statements will run. Remember, if you are not writing this break statement after each and every case, so this is important. If you do not write this break statement, all the cases will run, so it breaks the flow. That means that if case y is being matched, it will run the following lines, or you can say the this part, and then it will break out of this switch statement. So there is one more case here. We call this case as default case. Default case. And default case means that, let's say the user has not entered y or even n. Let's suppose the user entered e by mistake or maybe deliberately. So we will just write a default case to handle that. And in this default case followed by a semicolon, since we do not know what will be the value, so we are not going to write any value here. So we will just write default case, and we will write something like wrong option. That means the user has chosen a wrong option. He has not chosen yes or no. And then we will use a break statement. So now we have understood two things: switch statement and the break statement. So break statement will break the flow if one case is matched. Similarly, break is also used in loops, and it you know that in loops, for example, I say for loop, there are 3 conditions in the for loop, and we know that this middle one condition, this one, compares the value of the initialized value with some variable, and if this becomes false, we will come out of the loop. But there are some conditions in which we do not want to run this loop, so we will use a break statement here, or we can use this break statement anywhere when we want to, when we do not want to run this loop, we want to go out of this loop. So break statement does the breaking of the loops, and it has a similar working here. So we have covered two topics, switch statements and the break statement. So switch statement is based upon choices, and there is a default case also, and the break statement is used to break the flow. So it breaks the flow, and if it is applied in any loop, for loop, it will just come out of the loop. So let's now implement this in our C-line IDE, and it will become more clearer to you of these two statements. You will see how these actually works. So let's just delete this, and we are going to change this variable this time. This time we are going to use character. So I will write character choice, and in the next line I will tell user to enter a choice followed by a semicolon, and then I will give this choice to the switch part. So I will give the choice, followed by a circular braces, choice, and then the block of statement of switch, and then we can write some cases here. Let's suppose the case is y, small y, and it is followed by a colon, and we will say here, we will print here yes, and we will end it by semicolon. To end a particular case, we are going to use a break statement here. So we will use break statement here, followed by a semicolon. So after breaking the case, now we are going to write another case. We can say it as case n. In this case, we will print no, and then obviously we are going to break and then let's suppose we want to add a default case. So we will also write a default case here, and in this default case I will just print out wrong choice. So you can see here that this is our default case, and remember to add a break statement. So even if you do not write a break statement in the last case, it will not matter because it has already checked all the cases. So if you do not add a break statement here, it will run this part and it will also run the next case. So this break is used to get out of this switch statement. So this is our switch statement and the break statement. So let's now run and see how the program works. So you can see here that it has printed enter a choice, wrong choice, because I have not taken any input from the user here. So we will have to take input from the user. So cin choice. So if there is no input from the user, the default case will run. As you can see here, this is a default case. So let's now again run this with some other input. So you can see this time that I have entered choice y. So y is being matched with this case and it has printed yes here. So we have just done switch case. So let's see what will happen if I do not use break statement. What will it do? Let's see what will happen if I am not using any break statements in the switch part. So I'm going to run it again. So you can see here that I have entered a choice Y here, but all the cases are run, including the default case. You can see that all the cases are run. So break statement is essential here. You will have to use the break statement to break the cases, or else it will run all the cases. Similarly, this break can also be used in loops, in which we have already done in the previous part. We have done loops. If you want to break out of the loop in any case, and you can just write if in that, you can use if else, and in if else you can compare with the condition, and then you can write break statement inside the if you want to break out of the loop. So next, what we are just going to do, we're not going to go to continue statement now. We will first cover the topic nested loops, which is super simple. We have already done loops, and now we are going to do nested loops. So let's see what are nested loops. So nested loops, or you can say the meaning of nested, is that you are going to use another loop inside a loop. That means that, let's take an example of for loop. So what we are just going to do is, in the for loop, we know that there are three conditions: initialization, check condition, updation. And we know that this is the block of statements of the for loop. But what if I say that I want to run another loop inside this for loop? So what if in this control statement I write like this: I am creating another loop, and it has its own block of statements here. So this type of for loop is known as nested loop. So it is super simple. You can see here one loop, and then in its code, or you can say in its block of statements, there is another for loop. Similarly, you can do it with while, like while and your condition here. Let's suppose I less than 10. I'm taking it to be random here, so this is random. So while, and this is the code, this is the block of statements of while, and in this while I am again creating a while loop with some other value like j greater than 5. This is random, and then the code of this while loop. So this is a nested while loop. Similarly, there is a nested do while, and nested if else also. So let's see nested if else. So this nested is very used. It is very oftenly used in programming, because there are a lot of problems that will be solved by using two or more loops, and that too one inside the other. So you can again use a for loop inside it, and similarly so on. So let's see nested if else. So if, and the condition here, it can be any condition here, and we're going to write else part. In this else part, I can again use an if statement like this, and the else part of this if statement. So in the nested if else statement, you'll have to take care that you have declared an else part of the following if part. So it sometimes become confusion. It creates a lot of confusion if you're not using proper way to write. For example, if I write if I less than 10 and I'm properly using these curly braces, and that means that there will be some block of statements in this if loop, and then I will close it. Then on the same line, let's suppose this is our IDE, and we taking care of indentation, or you can say the number of spaces, you can easily distinguish between the if of one part and if else of another part. So let's say I want to write else part, but this time instead of writing this whole if inside this else part or another if in this part, what we can do here, we can use else if. So this is something different. So you can see that this is not if else, this is if else and then else if. So we are just writing another if else in this part, and this if should have another else part like this. So this is our if else nested if else. So you can see that this is nested if else, while this is else if. I'm writing here else if. So this is our nested loop. So we have covered so many loops and statements at this point. The last one that we're just going to do is the continue statement. So continue statement is a little bit different from the break. In the break statement case, you know that if you're going to use break statement, it will break out of the loop or the cases in the switch. But using a continue statement will just mean that you are not going to come out of the loop. So continue statement means you will have to continue checking the condition. So let's suppose I have a for loop here. Let's suppose this is our for loop, and in this for loop there are some 3 conditions. One is the initialization, then in this part we are going to check the values, and let's suppose I am writing here if else. Here is a condition, if and then else inside this for loop. In this if else part, if I write continue, so this continue means that you will have to again go and check the statement. So you will have to first update it and then you are going to check again. So break is if I am using break here. Let's suppose I use break here. So if a break statement is used instead of a continue statement, it will come out of the loop. So it is not going to check again. But if you're using a continue statement, it will continue with the same procedure. So we have discussed a lot of things in this flow control chapter. We have discussed if else, for loop, while, do while, then nested,